So it's been nearly a month since the last history budget film. I think now would be as good of a time as ever to check on my views I have. Hey, 23 views! Wait, that's pretty bad. Is that just me, or is there a heavy sense of deja vu around here? Anyways, hello.
Todd couldn't seem to get enough of my last history video, so if fate had it, I'd make a new one, following the events of the last one.
And what historical event are we visiting today? None other than the Cold War. So sit down, open your ears, maybe bring an extra shirt or two, because it's about to get a whole lot colder. Don't forget, if you want to help this channel and you enjoy my content, there's always the subscribe button, so subscribe if you want to and you aren't already, because I do weekly uploads, or I at least attempt to do weekly uploads. So yeah, thanks in advance. So for this video I'll be focusing on the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, and the battle between capitalism and communism. Although they did have allies during this war, it was a lot more politics than warfare. The term Cold War was actually given to us by none other than George Orwell, predicting it as a nuclear stalemate between two or three monstrous superstates. But let's rewind to the origins. Picking up where we left off with the surrender of Nazi Germany in 1945, there was an obvious celebration of victory, but there is an awkward relationship left with Russia and the US. So they never actually really liked each other, one being capitalist, which to describe it is an economic system in which countries, trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit. I took that from the dictionary, by the way. This system was used by the US. The other was communism, and this is where all property is owned by the community and things are given to people by the government depending on certain needs of a person. And that was also the dictionary, but I simplified it a bit. Anyway, both countries' government love their way of doing things. The President of the US in 1945, Harry Truman, as sadly Franklin D. Roosevelt died of a stroke on the 12th of April 1945, just mere months away from the victory of World War II. And the guy in charge of Russia was none other than Joseph Stalin. He was the embodiment of anti-capitalism, and he wanted a worldwide revolution, and he was a terrible dictator, and he rules from the 20s all the way to the 50s. And Stalin was a tad bit annoyed when his spies discovered that the UK and the US had been secretly working on atomic bombs without telling them. So these are the reasons they have a bit of a rocky relationship, to say the least. So during 53 to 57, they were kind of relaxing a bit, until they reached 58, when they stopped relaxing and started hating each other, really. They never really stopped hating each other, but nothing says I hate you more than showing off your atomic bombs. In 1962, it got a little interesting. The Soviets were setting up ballistic missiles in Cuba, and this scared the Americans because Russia was within striking range of America now. So there was a Cuban Missile Crisis broke out. So America had to think hard about what they were going to do.
Warning. The following scenario is most fictitious and should be taken with a grain of salt for optimal consumption experience.
Good morning, WDC. Have you ever slept in a 3-star hotel before, America? Well, I'm John F. Kennedy, and that question was rhetorical, irrelevant, and was in no way leading up to a metaphor. I'll be your host for tonight on the Wheel of Dilemmas. Somehow we've found a way to blend politics and modern entertainment to create a profitable game show. We have to do something. But what? We find out tonight, folks. Come one, come all, and witness the opportunity of a lifetime or crippling loss. Let's spin the wheel! Ooh, what's it gonna land on? I hope there's free dental in there. And it's going to land on... You know what? I don't know about you, but now seems like the perfect time to cut to a commercial break.
Have you ever stared at your room for hours and hours upon end? Have you ever felt something was ever missing? Then you need a salt nose. With our revolutionary technology, cutting-edge laser printers, and passion for salt and noses alike, we have designed the perfect sculpture to bring life back into your room.
I have been using Salt Nose for 17 years. I've never stopped staring at it. I'm legitimately crazy.
So don't waste any more time staring at a wall without a salt nose. Buy yours today.
Salt Nose does not take any all responsibility for suffocation/nausea.
And it's going to land on... I don't think we should do that. You know what? Forget this, guys. Let's just put Cuba on lockdown, alright? I thought I told you to rig the wheel to that. You know what? I'm sick of you guys. I quit!
Hear what I mentioned earlier about fictitious scenarios? Yeah, you bet this was one of them. But indeed they did put a lockdown for shipments to Cuba, and this actually successfully stopped Russian shipments, and this brought them near to the close of nuclear warfare. Messages even passed between JFK and a new man in charge of Russia, Khrushchev. Russia complied to halt building their missiles in Cuba, and that completed ones would be returned to the Soviet Union. And Kennedy promised he would withdraw the nukes in Turkey, and thus was the end of the Cuban crisis. Soon enough, the two big boys decided between them that it would be a treaty signed between each other abolishing the authority to test nuclear weapons above ground. But Russia was kinda embarrassed about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and became determined to make their military superior to everyone else's military. For the next 25 years, the Red Army built up a bunch of forces that the US matched. Eventually, the Soviets sent their troops east to Germany, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Afghanistan. US overthrew them in Guatemala. Then there was the Basic Invasion. An invasion of Cuba led by the American government that happened a tiny bit before the Cuban crisis. Honestly, the American government really didn't like the Cuban government very much. The Cuban exiles that were trained by the US tried to invade and kick out the government because JFK thought they were stinky. When they rocked up to Castro, who was in charge of Cuba at the time, he was like,
Didn't expect this, did you?
and then he captured all of the exiles. So then JFK was like,
Look, Cuba, can we just pay you $28 million in construction equipment for the return of our soldiers?
and then Cuba was like,
Yeah.
and then some person called Eleanor Roosevelt was like,
We failed to raise enough money, so we can't do that.
and then Cuba was like,
Well, if we can't get that, then we want this.
and America was like,
No.
and it went back and forth until finally they were given $53 million in food and medicine, and then the survivors were returned to the US. Yay!
Okay, so let's continue. America also invaded the Dominican Republic and Grenada, but they aren't as important as the Vietnam War. Basically, North Vietnam was communist and South Vietnam wasn't, and America saw an opportunity to stop communism in North Vietnam. Basically, there was a past invasion by France, and they failed, and that just added more fuel to the fire. The US eventually withdrew in 1973, and North Vietnam took South Vietnam. In 1995, Vietnam released that there were 2 million deaths between both the sides. America learned that Vietnam was kind of a force to be reckoned with from this. So the space race. Honestly, I don't care for the space race. I mean, who really cares about the discovery of a spherical Earth? If you ask me, I think it's a dodecahedron. It's just a better shape overall. What, did you expect me to say a triangle? How shapist of you. Anyways, I couldn't find anyone on such short notice other than, him.
Yes! Hello, people of the internet. It's me, your favourite historian, Todd Rogers.
And what does Mr. Todd Rogers bring with him this time?
A beaver.
Why a beaver?
Well, you can never be too prepared, you see.
Okay. So, you need a countdown or something?
Oh, right. Well, you can leave. I'm ready.
Alright, later, Todd. I know you won't flick me down.
Ahem. The year is 55, and Russia reaches out to America and says,
I bet we can get to the moon before you, stingy capitalists.
and so begins the space race. It's all so exciting. Alas, it wasn't all fun and games. For example, my good buddy Abby and his family in Russia, believe me, it was bad for Abby's family. The government was spending so much money in Russia that all the poor could do was become poorer. Abby's family also made the best soup. That sorrel soup is perfect in summer. Oh, do not mention summer around me. Boy, I gotta tell you about the summer of 87 sometime. Abby was one of my good pals during the summer of 87. Me, Abby and Johnson. We painted the town red, the three of us. Speaking of red, the Big Red was having a blast. Metaphorically, of course. They launched Sputnik, pushing them leaps and bounds ahead of the US. But of course, there were no leaps and bounds happening on the moon at this point. The USSR had 4 failed attempts at launches between 69 and 72. But their story of success continues. They launched the first human to space. Then they also send the first female to space. But then they forget all about their one crucial flaw: forgetting to feed all of their people. They ran out of budget. America grabbed this golden opportunity and bundled up Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin together and blasted them into space. These were the first 2 men to walk on the moon. But rest assured, I can certainly moonwalk better than both of these chums. Now that's out the way, we can get back to my friends Abby and Johnson. What should I remise first about the summer of 87, or my youthful dancing career? You know, these things go both hand in hand so well that I need to go back further and tell you about both.
I think you've went back far enough, Todd. Maybe another time, though.
Come on, I came all the way here at last minute to lecture about the space race and I can't even mention my moonwalk.
I really hate to break it to you, but I think your dancing days are over. I'm sorry, but you're entering your late 30s in no time.
But my hopes and dreams...
It's just real life now. If it's all the same to you, I'd rather you leave so I can finish this section. Finally, honestly, my patience is wearing thin with that guy. Alright, next section. Now we're getting closer and closer to the end of the Cold War, as we enter the 70s. See, some stuff changed, and Russia split with China, so the unity of the communist bloc pretty much imploded among and stuff. Other smaller countries like Vietnam were showing they weren't afraid of any superpowers, and we can't forget about SALT, which stood for Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, which led to an agreement on limiting anti-ballistic missiles. In the 80s, the superpowers were back at it again, arming themselves as they competed for influence over the new Third World. But then it broke down because the Soviets got a better leader who got rid of the totalitarian aspects of Russia. Eventually, communist regimes collapsed when we reached the 90s. The democratic countries became a thing in East Germany, Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. Eventually, Russia got an anti-communist leader, and the Cold War came to a satisfying close. We got there eventually, didn't we? 2 months in the making. 2 weeks of researching and scripting, 2 weeks of editing, and 8 weeks of waiting for voice lines. But in the end it all worked out. I however regret to inform you that Phase 2's now come to a close. I know it's sad. We had some good laughs, though, and we met some really cool people. But all good things must come to an end eventually. Don't fret though, we'll be back when we return, and we'll be even better than before. I've got loads of stories to tell you, and I'm sure one day we'll have to hear about the summer of '87 from Todd. I may not get another chance to say goodbye before Phase 3 begins, but for now, thank you for everything, and remember, I'll never wish you a bad day.
A budget film production.
A budget film production.
A budget films production.
Budget films production.
A budget films production.
A Budget Films production.